NASA is one of the most important government agencies to ever exist, and in the world of cyberpunk, it has taken us even further than Luna. In honor of Artemis II currently circling the moon, here is the history of NASA within the cyberpunk universe. In cyberpunk, space colonization and exploration is far more advanced than our own, with the race to colonize space beginning back in the early 1990s. In 1997, the European Space Agency successfully builds the first colony on the moon. Constructed underground using controlled blast and nuclear power-heated drills, lunar sand was used to cover the caverns in glass, creating the tunnels of Tycho. 5 years later, the second moon colony, Copernicus, is founded, once again by the ESA. Like Tycho, Copernicus was also an underground colony, and even grew to maintain control over a mass driver that was used to catapult lunar rocks and ores out to the O'Neill station. These stations would then begin building the Crystal Palace between Earth and the Moon in 2000. And while NASA wasn't the first to colonize the Moon, they did have some interesting information on it. Before colonies were even established on the Moon, NASA had been sending unmanned probes for flyby missions, and these findings revealed something odd, something unnatural. Cydonia Face was a strangely shaped mountain, which appeared to the cameras to be shaped like a human or near-human face. The unusual shape suggested that these mountains may have been shaped on purpose. After the establishment of both colonies on the Moon, researchers were sent to investigate, and have been unable to provide convincing evidence of either natural or intelligent mechanisms having created these mysterious mountains. But NASA's files on them remains classified, and what they actually know is a mystery. Whatever they knew didn't help them win the race to colonize the Moon anyways. By the early 2000s, there were already multiple colonies on the Moon, several orbiting colonies within the O'Neill space stations, and even the beginning of the Crystal Palace, and none of them were owned by NASA. Faced with budget cuts and the loss of military shuttle payloads to the United States Air Force in the late 1990s, NASA had to fight for further funding and became relegated to deep space probes and scientific exploration. Galileo, the mission designed to study Jupiter and its moons, was even abandoned in 2004 after its launch back in 1989. This would mark the end of NASA as a serious space pioneer, or so it seemed. After this, NASA would successfully commission their space-capable Explorer-class manned vehicle that changed everything. Based on the Proteus nuclear propulsion system, this vehicle opened the highway to the outer solar system. In 2011, the ESA and the Soviets were the first to reach Mars, but it was NASA who truly made it theirs. In 2017, they would venture out to Mars with the Columbus mission in partnership with the Japan Aerospace Bureau. Able to now traverse the planet, this advancement would put NASA and JAB at the forefront of planetary colonization. 2 years later, in 2019, the Columbus mission successfully lands 63 people on Mars, with enough equipment to construct a small permanent base. These 63 people would establish the first permanent colony on Mars at Chryse Planitia. 2 years after arriving, Chryse Base would be completed. And 2 years after its completion, NASA would begin offering regular Mars flights that left Earth every 14 months, with plans to shorten this to every 12 months. The Chryse Base would continue to grow to a population of over 900 by 2025. The Japan Aerospace Bureau would also remain NASA's biggest ally, with the base having a 58% Japanese presence. It also had a massive network of living quarters under the existing base, which was also regulated by JAB. NASA would then become the main provider of the majority of personnel and equipment transported to Mars, including renting payload space at extremely high rates to the somewhat embarrassed ESA/Soviet colony that was founded a year after Chryse Base. With their position secure on Mars, NASA would also begin using its base to help them further explore the outer solar system and the belt. They would build a manned research station and 4 mining facilities within the belt, with 2 of these being on series, with more planned for the following years. NASA would also install small manned installations on both of Mars's moons, used to monitor orbital communications. The early stages of colonization were just the beginning of life on Mars. Mars provided the lure of freedom and a new life, but it needed people to flourish. The Martian colonies desperately needed skilled technicians, doctors, and scientists, to help build this new society. So NASA and ESA began advertising it. Their campaign showed an idyllic view of life on Mars, air-free of pollution, a non-violent society where everyone is working together towards a common goal, attractive package incentives for highly skilled individuals, the perfect new world. And it worked. The colonies began expanding rapidly. With an influx of applicants, NASA and ESA, with their individual bases, maintained control over who was allowed on Mars, and each colony was managed by a strict colonial government that reported to either ESA or NASA. For JAB, they would create their own micro-world, where traditional Japanese culture and work ethics were placed above all other concerns. These populations were made up of approximately 40% workers, with many of them being recruited from orbit, with the allure of a better life. The rest was made up of 35% colony managerial, scientific, and security personnel, with the remaining 25% being colonists, who have taken individual contracts for employment and living space. Once NASA, ESA, and JAB all began to have a presence on Mars, the topic of ownership became a point of conjecture, though no official concrete lines seem to have been drawn at this point. But that didn't stop tensions from rising because of it. The race to space became the race to dominate space. The United States Air Force would also become a contender in space, but on a more aggressive path than exploration. They would use NASA's nuclear propulsion system to provide protection in space. With 3 deep space weapons platforms, their threatening behavior became questioned. Many wondered why such weapons were needed in the first place. These huge floating gunships were supposedly to protect American interest in space. Whatever the case, the USAF was being eclipsed by NASA after they had gained massive popularity from their successful Mars colonization. And unlike NASA, they were having to justify their existence and large budgets to the then failing US government. But while the government was failing, NASA was thriving. There was just an unspoken way of Mars, and NASA was dominating it, especially being the ones who control who comes and goes. A typical NASA flight to Mars consists of boarding several shuttles, and sometimes a stop at Paradise Station, one of the O'Neill cylinder stations. Paradise Station is full of bars, casinos, concerts, and everything else you'd expect at a place named Paradise Station. Each new shuttle has harsher security checks to secure the safety of the Mars program, and after multiple security checks for the 250 passengers on board, they will be put into sleep compartments for the remainder of the trip. The passengers and portions of the crew are placed into low-temperature chambers, which keep the resources needed for these trips low. Passengers are also connected directly into a brain dance, with a large selection of movies, informational videos, or even conferences with their colleagues. A one-way flight to the moon cost around 5 through 7,500 euros, while trips to Mars's surface range from 20,000 in cold sleep to 58,000 in first class. Between these costly trips off Earth and NASA's basic patent for orbital energy transmissions, they had a steady stream of constant revenue. With the success of their base and their advancements in colonization tech, NASA would begin to look further than Mars. In the summer of 2020, NASA launches its Pathfinder mission. The world is excited to watch this major accomplishment if it succeeds. Every radio station, TV media outlet, and scream sheet covers the mission with the crew becoming famous. Stills of the astronauts were plastered on every type of merchandise they could fit them on. Mugs, shirts, plates, bobbleheads, bumper stickers, etc. But a week after launch, the coverage dried up. And a month after launch, the Pathfinder mission had been forgotten entirely. And eventually 3 years had passed. The trip was supposed to take 5 years for the shuttle to enter Jupiter's orbit. But the Fourth Corporate War ruined everything. 2 years before their planned entry into Jupiter's orbit, attacks that affected NASA would break out. Cape Canaveral was one of the first to be destroyed, and with it, NASA's mission control. Pathfinder was completely cut off. It wasn't until 3 years later and 6 years after its launch that a truce is made and the war is finally ended. Militech, instead of NASA, would be the ones to try to establish contact with the Pathfinder crew. And in 2026, they tried to no avail. Pathfinder's signal was completely lost. By 2077, no one knows what happened to the Pathfinder crew, or if they ever made it to Jupiter. NASA also launched another manned mission to Jupiter in early 2023, with the objective to conduct scientific analysis on both Jupiter and its moons. This specific mission became a major source of suspicion. Several corporations took an unusual degree of interest because they believed that NASA may have been hiding certain information revealed by earlier probes. Rumors began to circulate that systematic radio transmissions have been detected emanating from the planet. Whatever the truth may be, the fate of the DSS Pathfinder and its crew of 8 is unknown, as it was supposed to enter the Jovian system in November of 2025. Another mission that was undocumented was one planned by the Japan Aerospace Bureau and NASA. This mission was scheduled to launch towards Saturn in 2025 to follow up on the Cassini probes. It will survey the rings and other aspects of the system, but its focus is the moon of Titan. Previous Cassini missions couldn't confirm or deny suggestions that Titan's rain of organic compounds from the sky may have allowed life to form under Titan's photochemical atmosphere. Alongside these new space missions venturing further and further out into space, by 2025, NASA had begun developing antimatter engines as well. They were focused on going as far as possible, but whether they actually did is still a mystery. We don't have any other information about NASA after the year 2025. Whether their missions were successful is unknown. One thing 2077 did reveal is that Militech was planning on building a new colony on Mars. So who knows if NASA even still dominated the red planet. But hopefully one day we will find out. Anyways, that is all the lore for NASA in the cyberpunk world. Let me know what you think. Do you want to see more about NASA? Do you want to learn what happened to those missions? And do you want to go to the moon or Mars? I think either of those settings could be so cool for a cyberpunk setting, and there are so many possibilities, but let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my channel members. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. Thank you all so much for your support, and I will see you next time.